The chandeliers of Spygo, Beverly Hills' most exclusive fine dining restaurant, shimmered like diamonds suspended in midair. The sound of polished cutlery and murmured conversations filled the atmosphere, until a single voice sharp as glass sliced through the calm. "How dare you speak to me that way?" "Do you have any idea who I am?" Heads turned. The air thickened with tension. At table 7, near the grand piano, Jessica Williams sat quietly, her posture elegant yet unassuming. She wore a deep blue silk dress, simple but refined, the kind of beauty that didn't need to shout. Across from her stood Victoria Hartwell, a well-known Los Angeles socialite, heir to one of the most powerful real estate families on the West Coast. Victoria's manicured hand pointed accusingly toward Jessica as flashes of anger turned her cheeks scarlet. "You people never know your place," Victoria hissed, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. Gasps rippled through the room. Waiters froze mid-step. No one quite understood what had sparked it, only that Beverly Hills' most entitled woman was publicly humiliating a stranger. Jessica's calm brown eyes lifted slowly. "Ma'am, I believe you've made a mistake. I'm not—" "Oh, I know exactly what you are," Victoria snapped, cutting her off. "A pretender. Someone who doesn't belong in a place like this." The words hit like bullets. Jessica could feel every stare. Curious, judgmental, pitying, pressing down on her. But she didn't rise to the bait. Years of experience had taught her that silence could be stronger than shouting. Her quiet dignity only enraged Victoria more. "You think you can sit here among real people and act like one of us?" Victoria's voice trembled with self-righteous fury. "Tell me, who invited you? Who paid for your meal?" Jessica swallowed the pain building in her chest. "I'm just waiting for my husband," she said softly. Victoria laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Husband? Oh, please. Let me guess, a driver? A bodyguard? Maybe some poor man you tricked into bringing you here." The whispers grew louder now. People were recording with their phones. The drama was unfolding like a movie, the rich and cruel versus the calm and silent. Jessica wanted to leave. Her heart ached, but her pride anchored her in place. She'd faced prejudice before, but never in front of so many eyes. "Please stop," she said firmly, her voice trembling only slightly. "I have as much right to be here as you do." The restaurant went dead silent. Those words, simple, brave, undeniable, shattered Victoria's fragile ego. The socialite's eyes blazed with rage. Her hand shot up before anyone could react. Slap! The sound echoed through the marble walls like thunder. Jessica's head tilted slightly to the side, her cheek stinging, but her composure didn't break. She simply touched her face and looked straight ahead. Every phone camera in the restaurant caught that moment, the instant when arrogance crossed the line. And then, the doors opened. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit entered, sharp, powerful, radiating authority. His eyes scanned the room until they locked onto Jessica. Gasps swept through the diners. "Isn't that Nathan Williams?" someone whispered. "The tech billionaire?" Nathan's jaw clenched as he saw the red mark across his wife's cheek. The temperature of the entire restaurant seemed to drop 10 degrees. He walked toward them, each step deliberate and heavy. Victoria's smirk faltered. Her heart skipped. "Nathan," she began, her voice suddenly small. He didn't even look at her. He stopped beside Jessica, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Who did this?" he asked, quietly, but with a tone that made everyone's skin crawl. No one spoke, not even Victoria. When he finally turned his head toward her, his expression was ice cold. "You laid your hand on my wife?" he said slowly, the words carrying across the room like the calm before a storm. Victoria's lips parted, but no sound came. She provoked me. I didn't know. You didn't realize, Nathan repeated, stepping closer, that the woman you just humiliated has built more dignity in her silence than you have in your entire life." Phones were still recording. The world outside Spygo had no idea that this moment, this slap, would become viral before morning. But for now, inside the golden glow of that restaurant, all that existed was the raw, electric tension between arrogance and truth. Jessica reached for her husband's hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let's just go." Nathan hesitated, his fury barely contained, but when he looked at her eyes, calm, steady, forgiving, he nodded. They turned to leave. But before they reached the door, Victoria suddenly dropped to her knees, trembling. "Wait, please. I'm sorry." "I didn't know," she cried, her voice cracking. No one moved to help her. Cameras kept rolling, and Jessica, graceful even in pain, turned her head just slightly and said softly, "Now you know." They walked out together, leaving behind a restaurant frozen in shame and silence. Jessica woke up to the faint hum of her phone vibrating nonstop. The screen was flooded with notifications and messages, calls, emails, people she hadn't spoken to in years reaching out. But she didn't open any of them. She sat quietly by the window, watching the morning light pour across the city skyline. Despite the whirlwind of attention, her soul felt heavy. She never wanted to be famous, not like this. Nathan walked in, still in his robe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "The world's burning outside," he said softly. "But somehow you're still calm." She smiled faintly. "I've had worse storms, Nathan. This one just has cameras." He set the mug down beside her. "You don't deserve any of this. I should have protected you." She interrupted gently. "You did. You showed up when I needed you. That's enough." Nathan sighed, brushing his fingers against the faint bruise on her cheek. "People are calling for her to be canceled. Reporters are outside the house. It's chaos." Jessica looked away. "I don't want revenge. I just want peace." Across town, the fall of Victoria. Hartwell, meanwhile, in her luxury penthouse overlooking Sunset Boulevard, Victoria Hartwell was living a nightmare. Her phone was a war zone. Missed calls, angry texts, Sponsors pulling contracts. Her publicist's voice crackled over speakerphone. Victoria, it's everywhere. Every channel, every blog, every influencer. You slapped a black woman in public and then called her low class. Do you realize how that looks? Victoria paced the room, tears streaking her face. I didn't know who she was. If I had known she was a billionaire's wife, that's not the point. The publicist snapped. You shouldn't treat anyone like that. Your charity partners have suspended ties. The mayor's office withdrew your gala invitation. You've become the symbol of arrogance. Her knees buckled as she sank onto the floor. My life is over. But karma was only beginning. The power of silence. Later that day, Nathan's PR team held a press conference outside their Beverly Hills mansion. Dozens of cameras pointed toward the gate, waiting for a statement, but Jessica didn't appear. Instead, Nathan stood before the microphones, his expression calm but commanding. My wife and I will not be pressing charges, he said. This isn't about punishment. It's about reflection. My wife believes in dignity, not vengeance. We hope this moment reminds people that respect should never depend on race, status, or appearance. A hush fell over the crowd. In a world hungry for scandal, forgiveness was the last thing anyone expected. Jessica watched the broadcast from their living room, tears forming in her eyes. You didn't have to do that, she said when Nathan returned. He smiled. I didn't. You did. I just spoke your truth. Flashback. Jessica's journey before she became Mrs. Williams. Jessica was Jessica Brown, a girl from Atlanta's South Side who grew up watching her mother work double shifts at a diner. Life had taught her humility early. She remembered polishing tables after school, dreaming of college, and hearing her mother whisper every night, Never let anyone tell you your worth, baby. You show them. She earned scholarships, worked through college, and became a civil rights attorney. Her fight for equality wasn't just professional, it was personal. That's how she met Nathan, during a fundraiser for underprivileged students. He was impressed not by her looks or fame, but by her strength. She spoke like she'd carried 1,000 souls inside her. Nathan once told an interviewer, I knew she'd change my life before she even knew my name. Now, years later, she was still that same woman, grounded, graceful, and strong enough to rise above hate. Victoria's apology. 2 days later, paparazzi flooded outside the Williams mansion as a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Victoria, her face pale, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She wore no makeup, just humility and fear. Security tried to stop her, but Nathan signaled them to let her through. She approached Jessica, who stood by the front garden, watering her roses. The sight was disarming. The same woman she had humiliated days ago, tending to flowers as though nothing had happened. Victoria's voice trembled. Jessica, I came to say I'm sorry. Jessica didn't turn immediately. She finished watering, set the can down, and looked at her quietly. Are you sorry for what you did? Or for being caught doing it? Victoria's lips quivered. For both, she whispered. I was cruel. I judged you. I thought I was better than you. But the world saw who I really am. I've lost everything. Jessica's expression softened slightly. No, Victoria. You lost what was fake. Maybe that's how you'll find what's real. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. How can you forgive me after everything? Jessica took a breath. Because if I don't, I'd still be carrying your hate inside me. And I don't have room for that. For the first time, Victoria truly broke down, not out of shame, but from the realization that grace was stronger than power. Redemption in the public eye. A week later, Jessica appeared on a national talk show, not to attack Victoria, but to spread a message. I'm not proud of what happened, she told the host, but if it teaches even one person that kindness is strength, then maybe something good can come from pain. Clips of her interview went viral again, but this time with a different tone, one of admiration and hope. Nathan joined her halfway through the show, gently taking her hand. My wife's the strongest person I know, he said. And if the world's going to remember this story, I want them to remember her grace, not that slap. Victoria, watching from her apartment, wiped her eyes. She'd started volunteering at a shelter in South LA, helping women who'd faced discrimination. For the first time in her life, she was doing something not for appearances, but for redemption. The letter. One morning, Jessica found an envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a handwritten letter. Jessica, You'll never know how much your forgiveness changed me. I thought power meant control, but you showed me it means compassion. I lost friends, fame, and fortune, but I found something better. Conscience. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the mercy you showed me." Victoria Jessica smiled softly as she folded the letter and placed it beside her Bible. "God works in mysterious ways," she whispered. The moral that night: Jessica and Nathan sat together on their balcony overlooking the city lights. Nathan broke the silence. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Jessica thought for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "Because now maybe someone out there will think twice before they judge a stranger." He smiled, kissing her forehead. "You really are something else, Mrs. Williams." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "No, Nathan. I'm just someone who refuses to let hate win." As the camera of the imagined YouTube scene faded to the night sky, a city glittering with lessons, Jessica's words lingered like an echo in the heart. When someone tries to humiliate you, don't respond with hate. Respond with grace. Because grace is louder than revenge. Three days after the incident, Jessica received an unexpected call from Lena Matthews, a respected journalist from the Global View. "Mrs. Williams," Lena said, her tone both respectful and cautious, "I know you've refused interviews so far, but I think the world needs to hear your side. Not about the slap, but about what grace looks like in the face of hate." Jessica hesitated. "I'm not looking for attention," she replied. "I understand," Lena said softly. "But sometimes silence teaches less than words spoken with kindness." After much thought, Jessica agreed, but only if it could be done her way. No sensationalism, no drama, just truth. The next morning, the interview aired live. The camera opened with Jessica sitting on her balcony, dressed in white, her voice calm yet powerful. "I didn't choose to be part of that moment," she began, "but I chose what it would mean for me." Lena leaned forward. "And what does it mean?" Jessica smiled faintly. "That power doesn't come from money or fame. It comes from self-control. When someone tries to tear your dignity away, the only thing you can control is how you respond. I chose peace." The audience watching at home fell silent. The clip went viral, again, but this time for a different reason. People began posting comments like, "She turned humiliation into inspiration. That woman's grace is unmatched. We need more Jessicas in this world." The movement begins within a week. Something extraordinary unfolded. A non-profit organization named Grace United was formed by Jessica's followers, dedicated to teaching self-worth, empathy, and emotional resilience in schools across the country. What started as a small online initiative soon drew support from celebrities, educators, and activists. Jessica was invited to be its honorary ambassador. Though hesitant at first, Nathan encouraged her. "This isn't about fame," he said. "It's about purpose. Maybe what happened wasn't random. Maybe it was meant to start something bigger." Jessica looked out the window, reflecting. "Maybe Grace really can go viral," she said with a quiet smile. The broken socialite across town, Victoria Hartwell, was living through her own transformation. Her face, once on billboards and charity gala banners, had disappeared from public life. Brands severed ties, her friends ghosted her, and the same society she once dominated turned its back. But the silence forced her to face something she'd avoided all her life: herself. She sat in her penthouse one night, staring at her reflection. The woman she saw didn't look powerful anymore, just lost. She whispered to her reflection, "Who are you without your name, your parties, your money?" The next morning, Victoria did something no one expected. She walked into a small women's shelter downtown, dressed in simple jeans and a hoodie, and said quietly to the volunteer coordinator, "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." At first, no one recognized her, but over the next week, she showed up every morning, cleaning, serving food, listening to women's stories. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being photographed or admired. She was learning, and strangely, it felt peaceful. Jessica Meets the World as Grace United gained momentum. Jessica began receiving invitations from schools and universities to speak. She wasn't a professional speaker, but every time she stood on stage, people felt her sincerity. At one event, a teenage girl stood up during the Q&A and asked, "Mrs. Williams, weren't you angry? Didn't you want revenge?" Jessica smiled kindly. "Of course I was angry," she said. "I'm human. But anger is like fire. It can cook your food or burn your house down. I chose to cook something good from it." The auditorium erupted in applause. Clips from her talk spread across the internet. People started calling her the Queen of Grace. Nathan teased her gently. "Careful, your halo's showing." She laughed. "I don't want a halo. Just hope that my story helps someone stand taller when life tries to knock them down." Victoria's chance at redemption. One afternoon, Jessica received an unexpected email from the women's shelter. "Mrs. Williams, there's someone here who's been volunteering for weeks. She said she'd understand if you never want to see her, but she asked me to tell you she's changed." Director, Hope Haven Shelter. Jessica read the message twice, heart pounding. She knew exactly who it was. That weekend, she drove quietly to the shelter. No security, no media. When she entered, the women there greeted her with warm smiles, unaware of the connection she was about to face, and then, from across the room, Victoria looked up. For a moment, both women just stood there, the memory of that night still alive between them. But this time there was no pride, no hatred, only humanity. Victoria spoke first, her voice trembling. "I didn't expect you to come." Jessica stepped closer. "You didn't have to expect it. You earned it." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. "I thought I had lost everything. But you taught me that maybe what I lost wasn't real to begin with." Jessica gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "The world can take away your reputation, Victoria, but only you can rebuild your soul." And in that small shelter, surrounded by women who'd faced their own battles, two lives that collided in hate found healing in humility. A viral reunion a few weeks later, A short video appeared online, filmed by one of the shelter volunteers. It showed Jessica and Victoria side by side, helping serve meals to struggling mothers. The caption read, "From humiliation to healing, forgiveness in action." The internet exploded again, but this time with tears, not outrage. This is what real strength looks like. They turned hate into hope. Grace is the new power. Within days, the video had over 50 million views. Talk shows, podcasts, and global media hailed it as a modern parable of humility. But Jessica stayed out of the spotlight. She kept repeating one message whenever asked for comment. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. The dinner of dignity months later, Nathan hosted a charity dinner, not at an elite venue, but at the same restaurant where the confrontation had happened. The owner, embarrassed by the past incident, personally invited them back. This time, Jessica insisted Victoria join them. When they arrived together, whispers filled the room, people recognizing the same women whose viral clash had once shocked the world. But instead of tension, there was warmth. Cameras stayed down. Applause filled the air. Jessica raised her glass and said softly, "A year ago, this place witnessed anger. Tonight, let it witness grace." Victoria's eyes shimmered as she added, "And may we never forget, pride makes enemies. Humility makes friends." The two women clinked glasses, and in that moment, the restaurant that once echoed with humiliation now glowed with redemption. The message heard. Worldwide, Jessica's movement grew global. Schools in Africa, Asia, and Europe adopted her Grace curriculum, a program teaching emotional intelligence and kindness through storytelling. One letter came from a young girl in Kenya. "Dear Mrs. Williams, I used to be bullied for my skin color, but I watched your video and learned to stand tall without hate. Now I started a kindness club in my school. Thank you for showing me strength. Love, Aisha," Jessica cried reading it. She knew then that her pain had found purpose. Nathan hugged her from behind. "You see? The universe doesn't waste pain," she nodded. "It turns it into power." Victoria's redemption continues. Victoria sold her penthouse and launched a foundation called Second Chance Society, supporting women trying to rebuild their lives after mistakes. She refused interviews, fame, or publicity. Her only words in her first press release were, "I was once blind with arrogance, but someone's forgiveness gave me sight." Jessica and Nathan quietly donated $1 million to her foundation anonymously, but Victoria knew. She called Jessica one evening and said, "I don't deserve your kindness." Jessica smiled over the phone. "None of us do, Victoria. That's why it's called grace." 10. Epilogue. The true meaning of grace. Year later, at the Global Humanity Awards, Jessica Williams was honored for her contribution to social empathy and emotional education. In her speech, she stood under bright lights, the world watching. "I never planned to be here," she said, "but sometimes life writes stories we never expected." That night in Beverly Hills wasn't just about two women. It was about all of us. It showed how pride can destroy and how compassion can rebuild. She paused, scanning the crowd. "If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Never underestimate the power of staying calm when the world tests you. Because grace isn't just what you show others, it's what you choose to keep alive in yourself." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Among them sat Victoria, clapping with tears streaming down her face. And somewhere beyond the lights and applause, the universe smiled. Because two hearts that once collided in hate had become proof that forgiveness can rewrite any story. One morning, as Jessica finished her tea, Nathan walked in holding a white envelope. "Another invitation," he said with a grin. Guess who wants you this time? She looked up, curious. Please don't say another talk show, he chuckled. No. This time it's the United Nations Women's Summit in Geneva. They want you to deliver the keynote on empathy and equality in modern society. Jessica's eyes widened. The UN? Nathan, I'm not a politician or celebrity. No, he said proudly. You're something rarer. Authentic. She took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the envelope. Geneva, she whispered. That's not just a talk. That's history. Nathan leaned closer. And who better to make it than you? 2. The road to Geneva. 2 weeks later, Jessica found herself on a plane to Switzerland. Through the window, clouds floated like white oceans below. She wasn't nervous about speaking. She was nervous about what her words could mean. When she arrived, reporters swarmed the airport. Mrs. Williams, is forgiveness the new power? One shouted. Jessica smiled calmly. It's always been, she replied before walking past them. In Geneva, she was greeted by world leaders, activists, and media icons. Her story had transcended race, class, and country. It had become a symbol of human strength. Backstage, as she prepared for her speech, she looked down at her notes. Only 3 simple lines. Power without kindness is hollow. Dignity doesn't need to shout. Grace can change the world. When her name was announced, the crowd erupted in applause. Jessica walked to the podium, her presence serene and commanding. She didn't read from the paper. Instead, she spoke from her heart. Jessica's speech. The strength of stillness. When that moment happened in Beverly Hills, she began. I thought it was the worst night of my life. I felt humiliated, powerless, and alone. But I learned something that night. Silence is not weakness. It's strength waiting to be understood. The audience leaned forward, captivated. When we respond to hate with hate, the world gets darker. But when we answer hate with grace, the world sees light. I chose light. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only thing strong enough to heal me. Cameras flashed. Tears glimmered in the eyes of diplomats and celebrities alike. I didn't forgive to protect her reputation, she continued. I forgave to protect my own peace. And that peace, and that's power. When she finished, the entire hall rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Some people cried openly. Others clasped their hands in respect. That night, Jessica didn't just speak, she shifted the world. Victoria's second chance. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Victoria watched the speech from her small apartment. Her hair was tied back, her clothes simple. Her life now humble but meaningful. She had continued volunteering at the shelter, but now she was also running Second Chance Society. Her foundation helping women rebuild their lives after public mistakes or social rejection. Her phone buzzed with messages of encouragement. You're doing good work. Victoria. We all deserve redemption. But the one that made her heart stop came from an unknown number. Your grace saved someone else today. Victoria smiled, tears filling her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel defined by guilt. She felt defined by growth. The world responds over. The next few months, Jessica's speech became a viral movement. Schools around the world used her words in lessons about character and empathy. Politicians quoted her during debates. This Grace challenge trended on social media, encouraging people to forgive instead of retaliate. Nathan watched all of it with pride, but he also worried. Fame came with shadows. One evening, as they sat together, he said quietly, "You've become a symbol, Jess. But symbols carry weight. Everyone's watching your every move now." Jessica nodded. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just want to be human. He took her hand. And that's exactly why the world trusts you. The controversy, but not everyone was ready for her message. A famous talk show host released a segment titled, Forgiveness or Foolishness, arguing that forgiveness let wrongdoers escape accountability. Social media split in half. Some calling Jessica a saint, others calling her naive. Jessica stayed silent, refusing to argue. But one night, after reading thousands of hateful comments online, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the world doesn't want grace. Maybe they just want noise." Nathan hugged her tightly. "No, Jess, the world needs you, and especially when it's loud. Quiet voices change hearts. Loud ones just win arguments." His words reminded her who she was. She wiped her tears and whispered, Then I'll keep being quiet. Heu. The letter from a stranger. A week later, a package arrived from Ghana. Inside was a handwritten note and a small wooden carving of two hands holding a heart. Dear Mrs. Williams, my name is Amma. I was once attacked in my village for defending a girl from discrimination. When I saw your story, I realized I could forgive those who hurt me without losing my strength. Your grace gave me peace. Thank you. Jessica clutched the letter to her chest and cried again. This time not from pain, but from purpose. I guess grace travels faster than hate, she whispered. A reunion of souls months later at an international conference in London. Jessica and Victoria met again, this time on stage side by side. As part of a panel on human redemption, the moderator introduced them as living proof that humanity could rise above division. As they sat together, the audience watched in awe, the same women whose confrontation once symbolized hatred now representing healing. Victoria spoke first. I once believed power meant control, but Jessica taught me that true power is restraint. It's looking someone in the eye and choosing peace instead of pride. Jessica smiled softly. And I learned that forgiveness isn't just a gift to others, it's a liberation for yourself. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time, they weren't enemies or headlines, they were examples. Jessica's test a few months later, Jessica faced a new storm. During a charity visit in New York, an influencer known for chasing controversies confronted her in public, mocking her message and accusing her of hypocrisy. Cameras recorded everything. Jessica stood silently, the memory of that night in Beverly Hills flashing back in her mind. Everyone expected her to walk away. Instead, she smiled and said calmly, You don't need to understand me. Just promise me one thing, that when someone wrongs you, you'll remember how this moment feels and choose something kinder. The influencer froze, and for once, couldn't reply. That clip too went viral. The caption read, She's still teaching the world what grace looks like. 10. The legacy of grace years past. Jessica's name became a symbol in textbooks, speeches, and even university courses. The Grace United Foundation had chapters in over 40 countries. But Jessica herself remained humble, still cooking breakfast, still tending her roses, still praying every morning. One evening, as she and Nathan sat watching the sunset, he asked, Do you ever miss the quiet life? She smiled. I never lost it. Grace keeps life quiet, and even when the world's loud. He kissed her hand gently. Then you've already changed it. The ending that taught the world. The final scene opens on a bright morning in a Los Angeles classroom. A teacher stands before a group of young students and writes on the board. Lesson of the day. Grace is greater than revenge. She turns on a short documentary. The screen shows footage of Jessica Williams' speech, followed by images of her and Victoria at the shelter. A little girl raises her hand. Miss, what happened to those two ladies? The teacher smiles. They became friends, and their story reminds us that everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone chooses forgiveness. That's what made them special. The children nod quietly, watching the screen with awe. As the camera pans out, Jessica's voice echoes one last time. When the world tests your patience, answer with peace. When someone disrespects you, answer with dignity. And when life gives you pain, answer with grace, because grace doesn't just heal you, it heals the world. 1. The last interview. That afternoon, Jessica appears for what she calls her final public interview. It's not about fame anymore. It's about closure. The studio is peaceful, minimalist, and filled with flowers. The interviewer, a young journalist named Maya Ellis, smiles warmly as the cameras start rolling. "Mrs. Williams," Maya begins softly, "the world knows your story. From humiliation to hope, from hate to healing. But what have you learned from it all?" Jessica pauses, thinking deeply before answering. "I've learned," she says slowly, "that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing for the world, if you respond with grace." Maya leans forward. "And forgiveness? Does it ever lose its power?" Jessica shakes her head gently. "Never. Forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a daily choice. Every morning I choose peace over bitterness, purpose over pain." The audience sits silent, moved by her serenity. Jessica smiles at Maya. "If my story ends here, I'd like to be remembered not as the billionaire's wife who forgave, but as the woman who proved forgiveness can build empires stronger than hate ever could." A call from the past later that evening. Jessica's phone buzzed with a familiar number. It was Victoria. "Jessica?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Yes, Victoria." "How are you?" "I just wanted to tell you, I'm leaving Los Angeles. The foundation's growing. We're opening a branch in South Africa. I couldn't have done this without you." Jessica smiled warmly. "You did it because you changed, Victoria. You didn't need me. You needed truth. I'm proud of you." There was a pause. Then Victoria said quietly, "Do you ever think about that night?" Jessica's eyes softened. "Every day. But not with pain anymore, with gratitude. Because sometimes God uses humiliation as a doorway to transformation." On the other end, Victoria began to cry softly. "You saved my soul, Jessica." Jessica whispered back, "No, my friend. You saved it yourself, the moment you chose humility." The journey comes full circle. A few weeks later, Jessica visited the Hope Haven shelter, the same place where she and Victoria had met after everything. The walls now carried photos of women whose lives had been changed through Second Chance Society. One picture caught her eye, a woman smiling proudly beside her child with the caption, "She forgave." And that's when her healing began. Jessica stood quietly, tears glistening in her eyes. A young volunteer approached her nervously. "Mrs. Williams, your story brought me here. I used to think forgiveness made people weak, but now I see it makes them unstoppable." Jessica smiled. "That's the truth, dear. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it transforms it." A new generation learns grace months later. Jessica was invited to attend a youth conference called The Future of Empathy, where young leaders shared how her teachings had changed their perspectives. On stage, a 16-year-old girl named Aisha from Kenya, the same girl who once wrote her a letter, stood and said, "When people insulted my skin, I wanted to fight back. But I remembered Mrs. Williams's story. So I forgave, and now those same people are my friends." The audience erupted in applause. Jessica watched with pride from the front row, holding Nathan's hand tightly. Nathan whispered, "Look at that. The seed you planted has become a forest." She smiled. "And the forest will keep growing long after I'm gone." The passing of the torch years passed. The Williams mansion, once the center of media storms, became a retreat for peace workshops. Jessica's health began to decline slowly with age, but her spirit never dimmed. She spent her days writing letters, not to the powerful, but to ordinary people who'd written to her for guidance. Each letter ended with the same line, "May grace find you where anger left you." On her 70th birthday, Grace United held a global virtual celebration. Millions joined the live stream from villages, schools, and cities around the world. Jessica appeared briefly on camera, wrapped in a white shawl, smiling gently. "My time is slowing," she said softly, "but grace never slows. Keep forgiving, keep loving, keep shining. Because someday someone will look at your life and say, that's what peace looks like." The world watched in tears. The final goodbye. A few years later, Jessica passed peacefully in her sleep, a candle that burned bright until the end. Her death wasn't met with sorrow, but celebration. The news called her the woman who taught the world to forgive. At her funeral, people of every color, faith, and background filled the cathedral. Nathan stood at the podium, his voice heavy with emotion. My wife didn't just survive hate, she transcended it. She didn't just forgive a slap, she healed a generation. He looked toward Victoria, sitting in the front row. Their eyes met with quiet understanding. After the service, Victoria approached the casket. She placed a single white rose on it and whispered, "You forgave me when I couldn't forgive myself. Now I'll spend the rest of my life carrying your message forward." Victoria's promise. In the years that followed, Victoria continued Jessica's work with tireless dedication. She expanded both foundations, Grace United and Second Chance Society, into global initiatives. Schools across the world held an annual event called Grace Day, where students pledged one act of kindness or forgiveness. In one of her speeches, Victoria told the audience, "Jessica Williams didn't just teach me to forgive. She taught me to live with meaning. Every time I choose patience over pride, I feel her beside me." Behind her on the screen was a large image, a photo of Jessica smiling beside a quote, "You don't need to be perfect to change the world. You just need to stay kind when it's hardest." 10 years later, the monument of Grace, on the 10th anniversary of Jessica's passing, a memorial statue was unveiled in Beverly Hills, right outside the restaurant where it all began. The statue showed Jessica standing gracefully, head held high, eyes calm, her hand extended, not in anger but in peace. The plaque below read, "Grace is not weakness. It is power perfected in patience. Jessica Williams, 1978-2048. People came from all over the world to visit the site. Tourists, students, even world leaders. Some came to take pictures. Others came to reflect. Victoria stood quietly among them, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "You turned my shame into purpose, Jessica. I'll never let your light fade." The closing scene. The story's final cinematic sequence fades to the Hope Haven shelter again. Children are laughing, women are cooking, life continues. On the wall, a mural depicts two women, one in red, one in white, standing side by side, surrounded by doves. A young woman walks in, her eyes filled with pain. She looks at the mural and asks the volunteer, "Who are they?" The volunteer smiles gently. "That's Jessica Williams and Victoria Hartwell. Their story began with hate and ended with hope." The young woman stares at the mural for a long time, then whispers, "Maybe I can start again too." The final message as the screen fades to black. Jessica's recorded voice echoes, her final words from an unreleased interview Nathan found after her passing. "If you want to change the world, don't start with politics or protests. Start with your heart. Forgive someone who hurt you. Lift someone who fell. And remember, grace doesn't make you small. It makes you unstoppable." Soft piano music plays as the screen fades to the closing title, "Inspired by True Humanity, dedicated to all who choose grace over hate."